Hello, welcome everyone to the Global Summit, I Am Possible, an event to inspire you to have the courage to be yourself and together to create a heart-centered revolution. My name is Mar Guerrero and I'm the founder of Alchemy. And today I'm thrilled to have with us Cayelin Castell and Tami Brunk. They are the founders of Venus Alchemy. They are both shamanic astrologers within the paradigm founded by Daniel G. Mario and Cayelin that is here. And today they are going to be talking about the Venus cycle and why it's a alchemical process. So I will welcome both of you.
Thank you so much for having us here. We're thrilled and delighted.
Yes. Yes. And I would love to start with your own personal journey with Venus and astrology in general, like why the concept of the summit is I Am Possible. So it's like, how did you get to know this work and how has been relevant in your life? So Cayelin, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. So interestingly, because I've been involved with the shamanic astrology paradigm and the shamanic astrology mystery schools, really met Daniel in 1990. So at the time of this filming, it's been over 30 years. And in 1995, 94, 95, he was doing research on the Venus cycle. And what I didn't know at the time was I was actually in a Venus return. Because and when we first started looking at it, we saw the Venus return as the 8-year birthday. And I was about to turn 40. So it didn't occur to me that I was actually already in the cycle because I'm an evening star, and we'll talk more about what that means in a minute, but towards the end of the cycle is a 19-month cycle. And what was going on for me at that time was I was literally in a priestess community, was initiated as a priest to become a priestess, to reclaim my priestess within was really the intent. And it was the perfect way to go through a Venus return at age 40. I had no idea. And now looking back, I'm like, the universe knew what it was doing. So then we started to realize that it's the whole entire 19-month cycle that you can work with. And so at my age 48 Venus return, my life was upside down. It was, everything was being burned to the ground. So I didn't work with it that much, a little bit in terms of ceremony and so on, but not consistently. So at age 56, I was going through my Venus return. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I made a Venus altar. I had a Venus journal. I went out and did the Venus moon conjunctions every single day. It was so transformative and so empowering. I was blown away by how much my life changed by doing that. And then I'll kind of hand this off to Tami here in a second. In 2014, I was supposed to teach Tami how to teach synodic cycles by doing a synodic cycle class. I just didn't really have a lot of energy for it, and we didn't get anybody to sign up. So I said, Tami, we need to think of another way to do this. And so we batted it back and forth, and we came up with the idea of we should maybe find more people would be interested in doing the Venus cycle as a ceremony, lead them through that cycle. And then we'll see about doing a live event. And there was so much energy to that. We had about 3 weeks before the first Venus moon gate was going to happen. And by the time we did the first class, we had 65 people. And by the end of that class, we had over 100 people. And we still have over 100 people in our current class 8 years later. So it has been just this remarkable journey of Venus really calling to us. And it's called to me in other different ways. But I will pause here and turn it over to Tami to tell her story.
Yes, our stories are deeply intertwined, obviously. So Venus just, when I was also, I guess I was 38 when I first learned about the Venus cycle. And that was just when Daniel and Cayelin were beginning to see it as that full 19-month cycle. So when I learned about it, it absolutely blew my mind. And as it will do for people, it just turned something on inside of me. And so at the same time that Cayelin was beginning to go through her personal cycle in a really deep way, I decided that I wanted to start taking a group of people through. And so I was the first person to start to guide an entire group through the cycle. And it was the one right before my personal Venus cycle. And so, you know, Cayelin had inspired me with some ideas, and I brought in some ideas of my own for how to gather people. And I'll never forget the first morning, it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, downtown. It was like 4 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. And I gathered a group of, there were 12 of us, I think. And we were out there drumming and singing, like right there, and seeing beautiful morning star Venus. And that's, you know, the first Venus moon conjunction, and taking people through that full cycle just absolutely lit me up. And so, as Cayelin says, so then the next cycle was my personal Venus cycle, which is the Gemini cycle we're in now. And so that was much more internal for me, actually. Going through it myself, doing the Venus journal, the altar, all of that was absolutely life-changing. And it was also my 40-year Venus return. So both Cayelin and I were really initiated into the Venus mysteries personally, I guess, at the age of 40, which is interesting because that's really the closest first Venus return. So, and then as Cayelin saying, in 2014, we ended up teaming up to do it together in an online course. And, you know, I had Pluto on my midheaven when we put the word out, and I will never forget, because I was the one who was fielding emails. I mean, 80, 100 people jumping in there wanting to do it. I mean, it was so clear. And the grandmothers, you know, the circle of the grandmothers who we work with a lot, with the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, it was so clear to both of us, because this was the Capricorn Venus cycle. It was so clear that it was the grandmothers who were calling us to do it. And, you know, my life has never been the same since.
It's so beautiful. I am now in my Venus return. So it's also, and I started knowing your work, and I did the cycles in the Aries one. So I think it was like 2 or 3 ago. And and it's so powerful, even being online and not sharing in person. Is still a lot conveyed. So this is why, like, I would love you to kind of like share this with more people, so that more people can take advantage of this amazing work. And then even like looking at the Venus, I didn't realize how I miss her in the past. Like, I didn't see her in the sky when I was a child. It's like, how do we miss her? It's so bright.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially when it's in the evening, it's like it's just there. You just see her. So it's amazing how we don't see when we are not looking.
I remember when I was in college seeing the super bright star every night over several months. And I know now it was Venus. At the time I had no idea, but it was like a spotlight in the sky. And I'm like, what is that? And it doesn't move. It's always there. And this was long before I learned all this. And so when I look back to that, I feel like Venus started calling me then, right? It's like, here I am, see me?
Yeah, I think she definitely seems to talk to us probably when we're younger. I remember I was just telling Cayelin that I was looking at some old pictures my mom gave me from when I was a child. I was probably 9 years old, and there was an image of kind of a magician with a crescent moon and a star on its hat. It was like it had this magic wand. It was so strange. I'm like, what the heck? Like, that symbol, the star and the moon. I mean, I would not know until much later just how incredibly powerful that symbol was. So she was speaking to us.
Yeah.
We were mentioning a Venus return, but maybe for people who are listening to us who are not used to astrology, always is kind of like breathe. If there is anything you don't understand, it's okay. And like Pluto in the midheaven, what is that? It's
Right.
okay. But it's like it's there, right? Like the soul remembers. So, but what is it? What is the Venus return? How does it work?
Since Tami, you're in your Venus return, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I am pretty passionate about it because actually, when I first started to take people through the cycle, I also did some really in-depth research where I interviewed 36 different people and learned what was happening for them in their Venus return. So a Venus return is when will happen every 8 years. So we each go through a personal Venus return every 8 years, and that's when Venus returns to the point relative to the sun. Well, basically we return to the same Venus cycle that we were born into. So that will happen in 8-year increments. So if you look at every one of your birthdays that is divisible by 8, so 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, etc., 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 that birthday will take place in the Venus return window. And we see the Venus return cycle as being the entire 19-month cycle from when Venus rises as morning star until when she completes the cycle, and then she'll go through a whole process that we should talk about. But that Venus return, you could say it's exact on that 8-year birthday, because that's when Venus and the sun will have the closest, they will be close to the same relationship with each other as they were when you were born. But that entire Venus cycle is your personal return. And so themes will reappear in your life during that 8-year cycle. And we will be born, sometimes we're morning star Venus, sometimes we're evening star Venus, sometimes we show up in another way. But, you know, Cayelin, you might want to talk about this. The Venus cycle is, we see it as a descent, like a death and a rebirth initiation, which is guided by the goddess Inanna and her story. So it might be really good to explore a little bit more about Inanna and the way that this Venus cycle relates to the Inanna, the goddess Inanna descent story, that is the whole lens that we work with this cycle through. But just to say that when you go through a Venus return, we see this as a death and a rebirth process. So Cayelin, you want to talk a little bit about Inanna?
I love Inanna so much. In fact, she's right behind me here. This was a weaving art piece that was given to me when I was in my age 40 Venus return. And I didn't even know, because I was 39 at the time. And as Tami was saying, there's morning star, evening star. If you're born in the morning star part of the cycle, it's closer to the age 8 birthday than if you're in the evening star part of it, which is closer to, you have the birthday and then the cycle ends shortly after. So we'll talk a little bit more about that maybe in a moment. But so here's the thing about Inanna. There's the Sumerians had the goddess Inanna and this story of her descent into the underworld, a descent that she chooses, unlike the story of Persephone, who is abducted by Pluto and forced into the underworld to go through her initiation. Inanna says, okay, it's time, gotta go. And so she prepares herself and she goes into the underworld. And as she's going into the underworld, she passes through 7 gates, sometimes 8. And literally what's happening in the sky are there are 7 to 8 Venus-Moon conjunctions after Venus goes direct in the morning sky that represent those chakra gates. And so it's perfect to work with ceremonially. And literally the Sumerians, every 8 years, would reenact the Inanna story as a ceremony. And this is part of what inspired us to do it as a ceremony online, but to do it in real time, like over the whole 19 months. And so there's the descent. She goes through each of the gates. And what happens in the story is she's giving up her crown, representing the crown chakra. She has a rod and staff representing her brow chakra. She has a necklace representing her throat chakra. She has a breastplate representing her heart chakra. And each of the vestments that she has to give up to go into the underworld really is telling us that she's releasing any distortions or any blocks or any misconceptions that are related to that particular chakra energy. And then she gets to the underworld, she dies, and there's a whole bit of the story where she's reborn, and then she starts back up through the gates, meeting with the moon again in the evening sky, reclaiming all the things she had to let go of, but now in a healthy way. Now without the distortions, now in a more enlightened or fulfilled kind of way. So but she goes back in the reverse order. So she goes from the crown down to the root chakra. When she comes back up, she comes from the root chakra up to the crown chakra, and reclaiming her vestments along the way at each gate. So it's a powerful story of initiation, of, as Tami was saying, death and rebirth. dying to who we think we are, so we can be reborn to who we really are. It's such a cool, and to do it in a community, to do it in a group, this is the thing that has been really amazing, is that it just powerfully increases our personal experience along with the collective experience, and exponentially increases the power and the intention of the journey. So that's, yeah, there's I mean, and you can find Anana stories online if you want to read, you know, the more specific details of the story. We'll also, I think in the free gift, we're going to give people access to the story and how it works in the sky, the cosmology of it.
Yes. And what is the cycle that we are now? So people can already tune into, like, this will be shared in 2021. So it's January 2021 already. But yeah, I think it's a very beautiful, there's so much medicine in this cycle, I think. So Tami, would you like to share a little bit about it?
Yes, because of course we're in the same cycle. It's the Gemini Venus cycle. And the reason we would say it's a Gemini is because when Venus rose as morning star, beginning a new cycle in June of 2020, she rose in the seasonal sign of Gemini. And whatever sign she rises in and is visible in as morning star, that is going to be kind of the overtone. It's going to be what we call the meta goddess. So that describes the version of the feminine principle that is on the world stage, or that's being developed, or that's most visible over the course of that 19 months. So in our journey, our collective journey, you can almost see it. It's like we collectively are in a meditation around the mystery of what is the feminine Gemini medicine? Who is she? And in the morning star journey, we are dismantling, in a sense, collectively. We're encountering, well, what are some of the distortions, or what are some of the what's some of the shadow, you could say, that Gemini encounters or expresses in the context of patriarchy, because this is really what the goddess is dismantling. And so, for example, Gemini, you know, what are some of the ways that she has been hiding who she truly is? And so as we're collectively going through the morning star phase, we're each collectively, personally and collectively saying, you know, what blocks us from the full expression of Gemini, and what has been the journey of the Gemini feminine over the course of the last, say, 5,000 years of patriarchy? Where has she been blocked, and how can we collectively be part of the alchemy of releasing those blocks personally and collectively? And then you want to talk about the evening star journey, Cayelin? Because I'm morning star, Cayelin is evening star. What do you know what you are, Mar?
I'm underworld.
You're underworld. Perfect.
Okay. Yes. So my birthday next year with Chiron as well is going to be quite interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's happening in this current cycle is we're in the morning star phase as we're recording, and up until, I think it's February, it's going to go
January 12th, I think. Of
goes in.
Sorry, no, yeah, it's like February 10th. It disappears.
Like that, yeah, and then it'll be in the underworld until May. I think it's May 5 or something. Early May.
Yeah,
it's
6, I think.
And then it'll be in the evening star, and it'll start to make the conjunctions with the moon and reclaim the vestments. But in the underworld is the place where Anana is going through the shamanic death. Not that when she comes back out, she's still Anana. She's just had a rebirth into her, you know, or she's not reincarnated into somebody else. So it's that death and rebirth, the shamanic death and rebirth. And going through that underworld process where we face our fear, where we face our shadow, where we face the things, maybe the misconceptions or beliefs that have held us back from being more powerfully who we are. That's what happens in the underworld phase of the cycle. And that's a super powerful time. And it lasts anywhere from 2 to 3 months, depending, each cycle is different. Now, just to say that every 19 months is one whole Venus cycle. And there are 5 Venus cycles. You can see this pentagram behind me. The Venus star, the Venus creates a 5-pointed star in the sky. When she rises as morning star in 5 different places, that creates the pentagram. So this is definitely the symbol of the divine feminine. as she moves through the sky. And so 5 Venus cycles over 8 years brings her back to a starting point. And that's why the Venus return is every 8 years. So here's another thing that's interesting, is that the age 40 Venus return is 5 times 8. So 5 Venus cycles every 8 years, it comes, you know, you're at age 40, you're going to have a significant Venus return. At least Tami and I could speak to that.
Yeah,
That has definitely been our
definitely.
experience, yeah, with that.
You too, Mar.
Yeah, it will be March next year. So.
Right? Yeah, and here
Mar,
you
are you
are.
40?
I will be 40 next year.
Wow, okay.
So, and look at you doing a summit and all the amazing.
Yeah.
And I can see it, like I can see it also, like the ways that I'm releasing of things, and also like the Gemini idea, like I'm taking life too seriously, and it's kind of like stop doing that.
Yeah.
With my moon, my moon in Capricorn is like, that's it. Light up a little bit, have fun. You can do the work, but have fun doing it. So
Exactly.
I'm just being reminded of that with this conversation.
Yeah, because Gemini, she is playful. She is the coyote. She is the trickster. She is creative. She doesn't want to be too serious because, you know, being too serious is not fun, because she likes to have fun. But she's also, one of the things we're really been working with in the cycle is she's the new world storyteller. She's telling the new stories. And so we're looking at the old stories. How are we dismantling them in the morning star cycle?
Yeah.
So that those old stories, like the story of survival of the fittest, competition is the way that we, you know, we get through life. But really, most of nature is in cooperation. So that's an old story we need to untell and retell.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is like the goal of the summit, the idea of I am possible. If we truly are who we are, there is no competition, because we will never ever be able to bring forward the same.
Yeah.
So we can just grow with each other. There is no way that we can compete with each other. We are just told that it works that way, but it doesn't, because we are different. So
and literally there's this idea that together we can do what we couldn't do alone, or what would be impossible, not I am possible, wouldn't be possible alone. So together, when we're all in our creative energy and we're aligned with our divine passion and power and intention, and coming together to tell a new story of how it all works for everybody, so good. So much fun.
It's been it's so powerful. I love the concept of the summit, because it really, and I think especially here in the US with that New World story, it's just like what you're saying. It's so needed that there not be that sense of competition, that we uplift each other and we tell a new story together. And you're embodying that with this summit. That's exciting.
Thank you. And I think it's also the Chiron in Aries is healing that as well. I have it right now in my Venus. So it's very much like, it's the ways that we think we are not worthy being who we are. Like we are either too much or too loud or too whatever. It's like, no, you're perfect just the way
Especially
you are.
if you're Venus in Aries, that can be one of the challenges. You know, people are like, oh, too much. Now, I just want to say, one of the things Tami and I also were inspired and guided to do in this Venus work is not just the ceremonial part of the journey, but also something we call the Venus signature. Because I have Venus in Aries, but my Venus signature means it's taken her a long time to figure out that she could stand and, you know, she could be fierce for everybody but herself. Right? It's like, oh, I'll protect my kids, I'll protect my family, I'll protect my friends, whoever, but protect myself? Oh, what a concept.
It's and so to think about, for example, like we're saying in this circle, it's interesting that we represent evening, morning, and underworld Venus, because even if I'm fascinated by the reality that even if you don't know the sign of your Venus, if you know when you were born in the Venus cycle, if you know your morning star, evening star, if you know perhaps you were born at a chakra gate. I was born at the solar plexus chakra gate, and now it also can shift. So now it's the sacral chakra. So that part of my body actually, and this part of my consciousness has been on the front lines for me. This is the big, and so knowing where you were born in the Venus cycle, just that is extremely powerful. And then when you add to that, what sign is Venus? Are there any planets in aspect to it? What was your moon sign versus Venus sign? All those kind of factors. That's what we talk about with the Venus signature. And not that you would want to just pull out Venus from everything else, but think about the Mayans, like they paid so much attention to the Venus cycle, and you can learn so much about what's going on in the world and what's going on for you just by looking at Venus.
And Venus is the closest planet to us. and so Venus has been, and it's the brightest, and it's the most stunning, and it's the easiest to track through her cycle and the stories that have been developed around that. So that can help guide us in how we work with it now. So that's the Venus piece. And in essence, it's really about the return of the divine feminine, not just for women, but also for men, because all men have an inner divine feminine, and their Venus represents all of that for them. So if they have a stronger understanding, a better understanding, a more comprehensive understanding of that, they can honor that within themselves, and they can honor that in the world as well. And so then so much heals as a result. We get a huge healing for both men and women around something that has been not that well understood, honestly.
Yeah, and it still isn't in a way, right? Like I keep seeing a lot of work done with women and their feminine side, but I don't think there is so much done with the men. No. And for me, it's something that I keep saying in many of the interviews, because it's something that I feel very called to bring forward. And also for other people who are listening to this, if they have that idea, please bring it, because men are kind of like more in need even to heal that part of them. They weren't allowed to cry when they were children. We at least had close friends that we were always able to share. But for men, I think it's even harder. So
it is. I literally just had a recent experience with a woman, a transgendered woman in one of my priestess circles. And so she is learning how to be a she, because because she grew up as a he. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess, and wasn't allowed to cry, wasn't allowed to feel, and is now taking hormones and is just like feeling everything. And it's really interesting to get that perspective of what it must be like for young girls going through puberty, because in a sense, this person is going through a puberty at the age of 64, right? Because of making that transition from the masculine identity to the feminine identity. And and I think these are the kinds of experiences that help us to understand more deeply the challenges that men face, as well as the challenges that women face. And we all face big challenges. It's not easy.
Yeah. I so appreciate that deeper look at that, Cayelin and Mar, that you're speaking to that. I think you're absolutely right, and that's the next level of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and even it's like, because it's easy to be compassionate with the victim, right? And here I'm going to be controversial a little bit, but something that is in my soul. Is harder to be compassionate with the one who is the perpetrator or the abuser. But maybe that person was abused, and normally that's the case. And the only way to heal the process is to be compassionate with the person who also did that, because they were also abused or perpetrated. And it is very difficult, but it's something that globally we kind of like need to do as well, to forgive us in the moments that we have been acting hurting other people, to really forgive and forgive. Yes, there's so much, because if not, we keep going in a circle.
Yeah,
I love what you're saying, and I want to say that forgiveness process and that healing process doesn't have to be done with the perpetrator, that person in person. It can be done from a distance. And in fact, for some people like myself, who my main perpetrator, my father, died, now I'm definitely doing it by myself, but he also didn't speak to me for the last 16 years of my life. So there was no chance to do it with him. And so, and it probably wouldn't have felt safe to even try because he wasn't even willing. So, but what you're speaking to is super important. We don't have to have the other person. If we can do it with the other person and we can figure out how to do it in a healthy, good way, that's great. But if we can't, we can still do it. We're not limited by the fact that we're not able to be in touch with a perpetrator or somebody who's caused harm.
Yeah. I just want to, I so appreciate the depth of this conversation. It's interesting where this is taking us, right?
Yes.
I feel, and I wonder.
Yeah, because something
like,
that I have here for a long time is the first time that I'm kind of like saying it. And in this, yeah.
I feel that so much too, Mar, and I think part of what also is good to articulate with that is it doesn't necessarily mean as you say it, I see circles of women and circles of men supporting men, and you know what I mean? It's not like the person who is actually persecuted that's necessarily individually forgiving that other person. It's more of that larger sense, and I see it. I had a dream at one point about these three endangered species. It was a triptych. There was a leopard, and Cayelin, you were in that dream too. And then there was a buffalo. It was Ishel too, you know. And then it was a buffalo, and then in the third was an orangutan. And the orangutan, when I really re-entered that dream, what I recognized is that the orangutan was the species that was the most like a human. It had to do with the journey of the human being. And it was a mother, and she was sick, and she was really in trouble. And from that dream, what I recognized was that even though we can look at the human being, the species, as this kind of, you know, an abuser of the planet, it's the human species that is the most wounded because of what we've been doing. And what I hear you saying too, and I think this is true here in the US, where we're really recognizing what white supremacy has done to our souls, it has to do with the damage it does to us to be perpetrators. It's profoundly, and we all are in one way or another. Every human being is, because we're harming our earth. And that is a very deep wound to be participating in that.
Yeah, and how do we heal that?
Yeah.
Is so important. Is the more that we can do, and the idea also with the summit in that sense is that the solutions won't come from out there. The government, even like for instance, when I teach Spanish to my students, and I sometimes give them like a social problem, and they have to talk about it, and then analyze the problem, and then kind of like suggest solutions. All of them, they always say the government should do this, should do that, and we are all doing that. And that is so disempowerment. Is not like, what can you do, even if it's very small? But there is so much that each one of us, just being who we are, is exactly what the world needs. The world doesn't need you to be an activist if you are not an activist.
Right.
Like the way to fix this is not that everyone now has to be protesting, or because maybe that's not yours. So it's like, what is your calling?
Yeah.
And then believe that that is possible. That's so important. And it's so much Venus as well, like this idea of and loving ourselves.
Yeah.
And even in the healing, like I'm a Reiki master, and when you start digging into the person's wounds, normally at the end it's just a lack of self-love.
Yes. Well, and as an astrologer, it's the same thing, right, Cayelin? Right? I see that so often. It's like, it can be actively self-loathing. Right. It's a very active principle within most people's psyches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I feel is for us to keep in mind and remember is that as much as we possibly can, and doing the Venus journey, whether you do it yourself or maybe join with a group so you have the power of the group to do that, is like, how do we remove those blocks? How do we remove those distortions? How do we remove those energies, those lower vibrational energies that are not love, and open the space and transmute and transform those energies into love, into the higher vibrational energies of love. And when we get enough people vibrating with pure love, well, the whole planet can transform in the blink of an eye, instantly. So, because there's something, you know, about that superconductive quality, you only need a certain number. So say we have 8 billion people on the planet, we need 10,000 people to be vibrating in that place of love, and then everything changes. And so the more that we can do, we can't do it for anybody else, we can only do it for ourselves. So the more we all take on that as that's my activism, that's my mission, that's my purpose. And if I can support and help other people doing that, I'm happy to do it, but I'm not going to go out and try to make people do it. I'll just invite them to join me because it's much more fun.
Yeah, that could get really tiring really fast.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing it back full circle.
Anything else that you would like to share about this specific cycle and where we are globally, to kind of like the timings or?
Well, I just like to say about this particular cycle is rare that the way the cycle started, it was an unusual place because it was connected to a royal star. That's past, so I won't go into that right now. It also has made one conjunction with the North Node. It's going to make a second one in May of next year, 2021. So because we're at the end of 2020 here. And then in January of 2022, a new Venus cycle will start. It'll be 8 years for Tami and I will be coming back to the starting point of where we started this process. And so to have Venus conjunct the North Node in the sign of her meta goddess, sign, twice, it's like might happen once if the two cycles happen to line up, because the North Node will come back to Gemini every 19 years. Venus comes back every 8 years. It takes 56 years for it to come back in the same sign, in the same meta goddess, to have this conjunction. And this is, I think, the only time in the 104 years we have the Gemini meta goddess on the world stage that it comes together twice. So this is a really powerful seed point of this Gemini goddess energy, and probably the first time she's been worked with consciously in thousands of years. So, so she's really calling forth that next level of her destiny and why she's here, and how she's reminding us to be more playful, to be more fun, to, to tell the new stories, to do it in a fun and playful way. So that, I feel like, is one of the most remarkable things that's happening with this particular Venus cycle.
Awesome. I think too, it's useful to remember that this Venus cycle ties us back to 2012. And I think a lot of us can feel that there's this kind of a next octave of what was happening in 2012 that's happening in 2020, 2021. And so, and it's Venus that is, because in 2012, Venus was in a Gemini cycle then as well. And that's when Venus transited the sun. And so this is the next octave of what was happening at that time. So I think when you think about that reality, you think about the fact that it's with the North Node, and the North Node is a very progressive, it's kind of like helping us to realign with our collective destiny. It's true north for the collective. And so in a very challenging 2020, I think many of us have been feeling that this is kind of this bright spot that we get to tune into. How do we lighten the frequency, which I feel is so much of what you're talking about, Mar.
Yes. And it's so fascinating that we have on Monday, of course, this is going to be passed for people who are listening, but the energy is within the video, right? Because time and space doesn't really work in the way we think it does. So it's fascinating that the solar eclipse this Monday is in Sagittarius. So it's like, how are we being only in one side and like too much invested in something, that this is the way that it needs to be, and just be able to listen. And for me, doing the summit, one of the things that keep coming is listening. Are we truly listening? When we listen, most of the times we are thinking, what are we going to say next? And it's been very insightful to do the editing of the videos, because it's like new information comes through, because of course I'm paying more attention than when I'm here talking. So yeah, I think that is also something that is coming up a lot. Which areas in our lives we are not listening because we think we know. And then that is the area that maybe we need to light up a little bit and play with it. Play with what the place that you don't want to go.
I love what you're saying. It's really bringing up the two sides of communication, because if what I'm saying isn't being heard and what you're saying isn't being heard, if we're not hearing each other and if we're not listening to each other when we're communicating, then there's something being lost in the communication. So, yay.
Yes, yes. So that's perfect. So if people want to go further and deeper in this work, we will have the website, but anything else that you would like to share regarding that?
So I mentioned that we will have a free gift, and we'll also have an offer for people. So when this comes out, there'll be links so they can go and find out what that is and learn more about what we're doing. And we'd love to have people join us. There will be an evening star class that starts in, I don't know, June or something. Yeah, I haven't looked at we haven't looked at the first gate.
I think it's
happening, but
I think it's May.
It's in May or June. I don't know.
I thought it was, anyway. Yeah, we'll see.
So you'd be welcome to jump in and join with us then. And we've got an amazing community of people that have been with us from the beginning. In fact, the reason we continued on was because so many people in our first class said, "You're going to keep doing these, right?"
Yeah, and we have like at least 30 people who've continued every cycle, including our wonderful grandmother, Emma, who will be turning 90 in a couple of years, right? And yeah.
Her 11th Venus returns at 88. Yeah, she's turning 88 in this Venus cycle. So pretty remarkable.
Beautiful, beautiful. I did 2 cycles and I can totally recommend. And that was my introduction to astrology as well. I just did, I didn't even have a chart reading ever for a few years. I just went to a workshop with Levi in Bali, that is one of the presenters for the summit as well. And then, yeah, I started doing Venus Alchemy before I took other courses.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't get a chart. I don't know what is a person
That's
telling
amazing.
me things.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It was me discovering on its own. And it's been very fascinating because it's been like slowly, not in 1 hour, all this information. It has been like, yeah. So I highly recommend for people who want to learn astrology, but they don't want to get into all the tech. Yeah. They don't want to become an astrologer, right? Yeah. But they do want to do astrology. This is a perfect way, I think.
Thank you, Mar. That is great. Yes, I agree with you.
Yes, thank you. This has been wonderful.
I mean it. So thank you so much. And yeah, thank you everyone. And thank you for your energy and for being who you are. And anything else that you would like to share before we finish?
Just really happy to be here, and I know that we are all possible, and
yes,
yes, we're here to bring our love and our light to the world, and that's the best gift we could possibly give, no matter what else we might do. Yeah. Just saying.
Beautiful. Yes, and that, you know, think about Venus, just beautiful and bright in the sky, and each one of us has our own version of that, and that's what we're helping people open up to.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope many people keep tuning to this energy of Venus.